Welcome to the Playground Talks podcast, a podcast for busy parents who want to own their parenting style and develop a stronger sense of how to handle challenging situations. I am Tamia Friat, your host and a mother of three. In this podcast, I will interview psychologists, practitioners, behavioral therapists, teachers, and other experts about topics that bother all of us as parents, so you can get both the parenting principles and practical aspects that resonate with you, give you confidence and joy. Hey, and welcome back. I think one of the million-dollar questions for us as parents is why my kids behave the way he is. Why does he scream, bite, or run away when something doesn't go the way he wants? Lucky us, we have today Mariko Fairly, a certified behavioral analyst with over 20 years of experience, explaining the 4 reasons that causes our kids to behave. We also talked about what are natural consequences versus logical consequences, and when to use the have to as opposed to get to help our children in their daily routines. I think that once you understand and practice the 4 reasons that causes the kids to behave, it can really help you to develop a structured strategy of how to handle challenging situations or even avoid them. This will be the first part of our conversation because it was a long and a juicy one. So grab a pen and a paper or open a note on your cell phone because there is a lot here.
Hi, Mariko. How are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to have you here because I think we have such an important topic today to talk about, which is the 4 whys behind kids' behaviors. But before we start to dive in, this function of behavior is actually a discipline that is being taught in applied behavioral analysis, am I right?
Yes.
So first of all, tell us a bit about what is it, applied behavioral analysis?
Applied behavior analysis is a science, actually. It's the science of behavior and behavior change. And so behavior analysts like me are looking at the environment to figure out why behaviors happen. And the simplest way to describe that is we're looking at what happens before a behavior and after a behavior. And we use all of that information to make changes to what happens before and after the behavior to change the behavior itself. So it's really, so much goes into why people behave the way that they do, right? Like sometimes we think, gosh, I have no idea. Why did my child do that? But I promise you there's a reason, and we just have to look for it. So that's what I work with families on, is trying to figure out the why.
So as far as I understand, there is research going on for many years, and they gathered all the information, the scenarios that happened before the behavior and what was happening after the behavior, and then they could actually distinguish the 4 reasons for kids and also adults to behave in a certain way. Am I right? So it is actually an evidence-based.
Yes, absolutely. So the really cool thing about behavior analysis is it's happening all around us all day, every day. Every single interaction that you have with the person at the grocery store or your partner or your child, it's all within behavior analysis. And so we can kind of break down like what that really looks like. But every interaction you're having, there's what we call an antecedent, what happens before the behavior. Somebody responds in a certain way. And whatever happens after the behavior, we call that the consequence. So in my world, consequence is not a bad thing. Consequence just means something happened after a behavior. Whatever the consequence is, that will change what happens to the behavior. Will it increase in the future or will it decrease in the future? And we know that, things that are happening in our lives, like a pandemic, for example, a child starting school for the first time, a new sibling entering their life, a death in the family. There's so many things that impact how we respond to things. So all of that's taken into account as well.
I get that. So let's dive in. We know kids have tantrums. So why are they acting out? Let's dive into it.
Sure. So yeah, like I was saying, there's so many kind of environmental factors that play into why people behave the way that they do. And I love what you said. It's so true. This certainly applies to our children, but it applies to ourselves, our partners, our friends, our parents. So yeah, take the information and kind of like let it simmer a little bit, because you'll be like, oh my gosh, that's something that happened, and I can recognize that now in interaction with my partner. So we talk about the 4 main reasons why people act the way they do. They want something, they don't want something, they need attention or connection, or it feels good. Something inside their body feels good when they do it. So want something, don't want something, need attention or connection, or it feels good. And certainly, like, I can give you tons of examples, right? As adults, a lot of times, right, we have a job, we get up every morning, we go to work on time, we put in the effort, and what's our takeaway at the end? A paycheck, right? We need that paycheck to be able to live in the way that hopefully is comfortable for us. And so that's a thing, that's a tangible thing. Money leads to us being able to buy other things. So for our kids, that wanting something might be, they want that toy that their brother is playing with, and they might act in a certain way to get that toy. Maybe they're grabbing, maybe they're hitting. And so our job as parents is to teach them a more appropriate way to get their need met, to get that toy that they want without sort of that quote unquote acting out behavior. So when I'm looking at a behavior and when I'm working with a family and they're coming to me and saying, gosh, my kid is having such a hard time sharing or with tantrums, we figure out the why. Do they want something, not want something, need attention or connection, or does it feel good? And then my next question is, well, what do you want them to do instead? So once you identify the reason behind the behavior, we have to figure out what we want them to do instead. What's a more appropriate alternative way to get their need met? And that's where the teaching comes in. That's where we're going to teach our child to communicate their want as opposed to simply acting out on it.
So I get that the first reason for tantrums and acting out is something tangible that they want to have, but they don't get it. So that's the no. And when they don't get it, so they feel probably hopeless and they started to scream or bite or just throw tantrums in whatever way it is. And at this moment, what you are proposing is to actually acknowledge the disappointment and say, well, I get that you don't get what you want, but now let's think, how can you get it? So for example, with the older kids, you can just teach them how to ask for whatever they want. And if you have any other suggestion how to address this need, please share it with us.
Well, we can and should be teaching our kids communication from infancy, right? Kids are naturally communicating with us. We just have to look for it. So it starts with babies who are, making eye contact or making noises to try to get your attention. Then joint attention develops. And that's when you and your child have basically like a reciprocal interaction where maybe you're not talking, but you're looking at the same thing, or you're pointing at something and they're able to follow your gaze. So all of that starts from infancy. And so when we start to label things, so when we're saying, car, duck, bus, and then that transitions to play, cook, from nouns to verbs. So we're building language from a very early age so that even when they're upset and they're crying, oh, you want mommy to pick you up. All of that modeling, that narration, what I call like sports casting, that is laying the foundation for communication. the most effective way to teach our kids what we want them to do is to do it ourselves, right? To model the behaviors that we want to see in them. And so certainly when our kids are having a hard time, sort of my 3 steps of managing a challenging behavior is the first step, acknowledge the want or the feeling. I understand you want your brother's toy, right? Like we have to be able to acknowledge that validates their feelings, but it also puts the words in their mouth. Oh, yes, that is like they're making a connection. That is what I want, right? I understand you want your brother's toy. Let's try that again. And you can offer a redo. And that, for me, that means you replay the situation. So if they grabbed the toy or they hit their brother to get the toy, then you're kind of walking them through the process again in real time, because that's how they're going to learn. Okay, you want your brother's toy. How can you get it? You can ask, you can point, you can hold out your hand, you can say mine. So no matter where your child is developmentally, whether they're older and maybe have a lot of language, or they're pre-verbal and they don't have a lot of vocal language yet, we can still teach our kids signs and gestures to help them get their need met. And I think that is the key. Just because your child doesn't have language doesn't mean they can't communicate. There are other ways to communicate, and we have to help them find it.
That is so true. I remember when we came to the United States and my daughter just didn't know how to speak English, we were working a lot about emphasizing the importance of nonverbal communication, because there's actually a lot that you can do even if you don't speak the language.
Absolutely.
So
Body language is
that is
the universal language, right?
Yeah, that is so true. So I get what you said about the no. Can we move to the yes part? Which for me, I get an example. Yes. So one of my kids doesn't like to take shower. And so whenever we say, okay, it's time to shower, there is many reasons to not shower. So first of all, I get from you, I need to acknowledge the fact that he does not like to shower for whatever reason it is. He just doesn't like to do it. So let's say I did it. What would you suggest as the second step?
Yes. Okay. So when our kids don't want something, it's important to acknowledge it. But depending on your child's age, right? You can sort of frame it in a different way. For young kids, I would focus on the fun and provide a choice, right? So maybe they don't want to get in the bath or the shower, but if you make the situation fun, it kind of redirects their attention away from the thing that they don't want to something that they might want. So I might say, do you want bubbles or no bubbles in the bath? Do you want to hop like a bunny or march like a dinosaur to the bathroom? Right? Do you want your Spider-Man pajamas or your Peppa Pig pajamas? So when our kids don't want something, maybe they don't have that option to not do that thing, right? So if they have to do the thing, give them a choice of how they do it. Give them a choice of who. So do you want mommy or daddy to give you a bath? Or what? Like, what do you want to wear? Or how? How do you get there? How do you want your bath or shower even could be a choice, right? Sometimes there could be a where option too. If you had 2 bathrooms, you could ask, do you want to do a bathroom upstairs or downstairs? Do you want to do your homework at the kitchen table or at your desk? There is always a choice. And so giving choices to our kids is so important because it gives them a sense of control. And that's really what everybody wants, right? We all want to feel control over our situation. And so for older kids, I talk to my kids are 5 and 7, and I talk to them about have tos and get tos. So there are certain things in life that we have to do. You and I, we have to go to work and pay our bills and take care of our kids. That's also a get to. But for our kids, they have to brush their teeth and take a shower and go to school and finish their homework. And the get-tos are playing, electronics, vacations, all those types of things that they want to do. So kind of depending on the age of your child, I think you can frame it in different ways. And even if your child is older, they don't want to do something. I totally get that. You can also set up a first then contingency where, okay, dude, I totally get it. You don't want to take your shower. It's just something you got to do. First, take your shower, and then you get to fill in the blank. Play video games, sit with me and watch a show. Then it'll be dinner time and we can have fun. Like whatever is motivating to them, put it in that first then contingency.
When is the time that you're talking about consequence? Because you mentioned it earlier today. So you say it's possible if you don't take the shower, you'll feel a bit stinky and maybe smelly. So that's your own consequence. So when is the time that you're integrating this into the conversation?
How old is your child?
8.
8. Okay. I mean, yeah. So he's old enough where you could be like, okay, dude, like you didn't take a shower today. How do you feel? Or there might be some natural consequences. So we talk a lot about that. So we can break that down a little bit. So if you're going to implement a consequence where you're saying, okay, you didn't do the thing I wanted you to do, so now here's the consequence. There's 2 kinds that are most effective. The first one is a natural consequence, which means we as caregivers, we have no influence on that. This is just something that naturally happens after a behavior. So like you're saying, if someone doesn't shower, they might be a little stinky. They might not feel good in their body. Or maybe someone will say something to them like, ooh, I can smell you. Maybe you need to go take a shower, right? The same thing happens for kids. Maybe you battle your child not wanting to wear a jacket. It's cold outside. You really need to put on your jacket. No, I don't want to. So maybe you try. They don't have to wear their jacket. Maybe you just shove it into their backpack and send them off to school. The natural consequence would be if they're not wearing their jacket, they might be cold, right? So we have no impact on that. It's a learning opportunity for them for future instances. But in the moment, we have to be okay with letting them have that experience. And that is very difficult for us as parents, right? Because we don't want our child to suffer. We want to feel in control. There's a lot of different reasons why we might try to push them to take a shower, put on that jacket. But sometimes it's okay to just like let it go and see what happens. That would be the natural consequence. The logical consequence is something that's related to the behavior and we have influence over it. So if a child doesn't finish their homework, then they might not get to watch a show after because that's what would follow. And that first, then we talked about that first do your homework, then you get to watch a show. But if you don't finish your homework, then you're not going to get to watch a show, that type of thing. It's not a punishment in the sense that it's harsh or it's mean. It's just simply related to the behavior, right? You didn't do what you were supposed to do for school, so now we don't have time for this other thing. So natural consequence, we don't have any influence. Logical consequence, we do impose some sort of consequence, but it makes sense. And it's not overly harsh or punitive. Like I work with a lot of families when they come to me, say, oh, my child was screaming and tantruming, and I just took away the iPad for the rest of the week because they can't behave that way. And to me, that's a very harsh punishment. That's a harsh consequence, especially because kids don't have a good understanding of time. So taking away something for a really long period of time is not going to be effective. At some point, they're not going to be motivated anymore because they don't have that thing that is really meaningful to them. And so you actually may see more acting out behavior when you implement consequences that last for a really long period of time.
For me, actually, the word consequence is not necessarily about punishment. It's, I think, what you've just described so brilliantly, which is logically and a natural consequence. So that's what I found for myself more beneficial. So
great.
But thanks for saying that. I like it. I'm going to embrace those 2 definitions from now on. So let's move, because we had one for the no, which is tangible. My kid doesn't get the thing you want. Then we had the yes, meaning that he doesn't want to go shower. But we say, yes, you do have to do it. And so this is the second reason. So let's go to the third one, which is attention. So that happens to me a lot when we're having like a double day play date, because my kids have their friends, I have my own friends, but they come and grab my shirts and they are like, mommy, but I'm in the middle of sentence. And well, I know they want the attention. So share with me.
This is definitely a big one for parents. I mean, kids are born to connect, especially with their parents. I like to address things from a proactive stance. And so what I recommend to every parent out there, I know life is busy. I know there's so much on your plate, but find time every single day to connect with your child, even if it's only for 10 minutes. And some parents are like, oh my gosh, I don't have 10 minutes. And other parents will be like, I have a ton of time. I'm always with my child. So what I would say to that is it's quality over quantity. Okay. If life is busy, you have older children who are in school, find 5 or 10 minutes where you can put away your phone, turn off the TV, and just sit and play with your child or read with your child, do whatever they want. This connection time is really key because it's feeding your child your attention and your love and your affection just because. Not because they asked you, not because they're acting out, but just because that's what they need and that's what you need. And doing it on a consistent basis where they know they're going to have you is going to prevent acting out behaviors. Because again, that structure and that consistency is going to provide security for your child. So 10 minutes a day, no electronics, no distractions, no siblings. Let them take the lead. I always say, like, if they want you to sit and bark like a dog for 10 minutes, then you sit and you bark like a dog for 10 minutes. If they want to build with their Legos, if they want to play Barbies, if they want to color, if they want to do a board game, that's all wonderful things. That's important work in that moment for you. And if you don't feel like you have a ton of time to do that, fair enough, or you have siblings, or you have multiple kids and you just can't remove the sibling from the situation, I totally get that too. Bring your child into some things that you're doing. Maybe you need to clean up the kitchen after dinner. Put some bubbles in a bowl in the sink and let them play in the water. And you can talk to them while they're doing it. Sit with them during bath time. And instead of being on your phone or instead of like moving around the bathroom, tidying up, sit with them, talk to them, listen to them. That is such an important thing. And I think, sort of take it for granted that we are spending time with our kids and connecting with them, but it really is the quality of connection. So we're not placing demands. We're not telling them what to do. We're not grilling them with a bunch of questions about how school was. It's just sitting and being present and engaging with them so that when they want to say something to us, we're there and we can hear it and they have our undivided attention. So that was my tangent because I think it's such an important thing for us to be doing. So if you're having a difficult time with your kid, always wanting your attention, that's the first place I would start. Get those 10 minutes a day of quality time. Now, when they do come to you in that situation with a play date and maybe are interrupting you, and I see it escalate a lot of times from mommy, then they're pulling your clothes, and then maybe they're hitting because they just really need you in that moment. What I would suggest is early on, when they're just doing the mommy, pay attention then. That's really important. You want to pay attention to sort of a lower level behavior and you don't want to wait until the behavior has escalated to screaming or a tantrum or hitting, because whatever we pay attention to, that's what we're going to keep seeing. So if we only pay attention to the really high intensity challenging behaviors like hitting and tantrums, that's what we're going to keep seeing. So when your child is saying, mommy, I might turn to them and say, hi, honey, I hear you. I need 1 minute or 10 seconds and I'll be right with you. Can turn back to your friend, talk for a second. And before your child can come over and start pulling on your clothes and hitting, you're turning back to them and saying, okay, yes, how can I help you? So again, you're being as proactive as possible, paying attention the first time they call your name as opposed to the 20th time.
I actually you just reminded me that once I heard that you can pull your child's hand and say, I'll talk to you in just a second. And here, give me your hand. That would be a reminder for me to talk to you as soon as I'm finishing my sentence. And I did it with my 3 years old. It worked pretty good, actually.
I love that.
This reminder.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even some kids who like that connection, that tactile interaction, or having them like count their fingers on their fingers while you're holding their hand or while you're standing with them. Absolutely. I love that.
Another thing that just happened yesterday, that my 3 years old liked to play with his siblings. And so he sometimes, grab their hair or stuff like that because he wants the attention. So another thing that I thought is what you mentioned, to help him communicate the needs of come and play with me. My role as a parent is to say, do you want to play with your siblings? So ask them, invite them to join you or play hide and seek with you other than pulling their hair.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, and 3 years old toddlers are, I love toddlers, but, it's challenging because they're still trying to learn how to communicate and cope. So for toddlers, especially in that situation, I would say less language from us is better. Let's say your toddler's pulling their sibling's hair. Your other child's probably screaming or having some sort of response because it hurts. And so in that moment, it's tough, but try to keep your cool and go back to, okay, want something, don't want something, needs attention, feels good. It might be any of those things, honestly, but probably in the moment, there's some attention, right, component. And so it sounds like you're able to identify that. You immediately offer the redo. It looks like you want your sister's attention. Say, well, Sissy, play with me. Whatever language they're capable of. If they have no language, they're pre-verbal, you can teach them to tap on the shoulder. You can teach them to point or gesture to themselves, like me. But in that moment, you just say what you want them to say, or you model doing what you want them to do. You don't need to have a big conversation about, why did you do that? Oh, you want your sister's attention. You can ask her to play. You can, right? Like, cut all that out. For young kids, you just say, oh, you want your sister's attention. Say, sister. That's it. Because they need to practice the appropriate way. And the best way to do that is immediately when the situation is happening.
You know what? I also found for myself that it's helpful to talk to the bigger siblings and say, you know what? He wants your attention, but you don't have to met his need for attention if that's the way he, grab your attention. So tell him, you want to play with me? Ask it. And so the siblings are also modeling this sort of communication style rather than hitting back, for example.
And that is a natural consequence, right? Because if you weren't in the room, he might hit or pull or hair. And if the sister were to turn around and say, hey, I don't like that, I don't want to play with you, or better yet, coach him through the situation, that's a natural interaction. You had nothing to do with that. That's going to change his behavior in the most effective way. So I love that. I think that's great.
Yeah, when you have an 11 years old daughter, then you can coach her how to talk to her brother. Yeah, that's the positive thing about having 8 years apart from them. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think we covered 3 out of the 4. So let's go towards the last reason, which is, you say, feel good. And I would say also the sensory reason.
That's really what I mean, right? So there's an automatic reinforcement that's happening in somebody's body. And so everybody does behaviors that make themselves feel good in their body. So some people might twirl their hair or suck their thumb or use a pacifier. Some people might, tap their foot or tap their pen, right? We're all doing things every day, all day, that make us feel good in our bodies. And so your child might be doing something that is a little bit frustrating to you. Maybe they're always jumping on the couch and you're constantly saying, stop jumping on the couch. Don't do that. You're going to break the couch. Or, Some kids like to flip upside down and watch TV, like looking upside down, or maybe your child likes to go to the top of a play structure and throw things down, or I have worked with families who the child spits from the top of the play structure because they like the way that thing looks or feels going down. So if you have a situation like this, it's really important to understand that underlying need so that we can help them get it met in a different way. If your child has that feeling of needing to jump and you don't want them to jump on that couch, give them an alternative. Can they jump on the trampoline? Can you make a hopscotch on the floor out of tape? Can they jump on pillows, right? How can they get that need met so that they aren't doing the thing that you don't want them to do?
I'm taking it to a different direction because I know some friends have difficulties taking their kids to birthday parties because it's so loud that the kids just can't stand it. And you can see by the way he reacts, put his hands over his ears. And so this is another sensory, I guess, issue.
It is a sensory issue. That one would fall under the don't want something, actually. So it feels good is, yes, there's intrinsic reinforcement in our bodies, right? We're getting something, our senses are being stimulated in some way, visually, auditorily, all the five senses, sound, touch, taste, smell, all that. If our kids are having a hard time at a birthday party, it's loud, it's crowded, they cover their ears, they don't want to interact with other kids, that's a don't want something. So if it's a don't want something, I think then it's important to teach them to communicate. It's loud, and then they can ask for a break. They can ask for help. They can ask to move away from that uncomfortable situation. And I think it's important that we give kids that opportunity, that we're not forcing them into situations where they are uncomfortable like that.
So can you give us another example for sensory? You mentioned jump. What could be another example?
Yeah, sometimes kids throw. Throwing is a challenge for a lot of parents. Sometimes kids throw because it feels good or they like the sound that it makes. So throwing could happen for any one of those four reasons. They want something, they don't want something, they need attention or connection, and it feels good. But that could be an example. So maybe kids are playing with toys and they start throwing them across the floor, and maybe a parent has a big reaction. Don't do that. You can't do that. Play with it this way. But the real reason, the underlying reason that they're doing it is because they like the crashing sound. So if you can figure out why, then you can give them an opportunity to achieve that crashing sound in a way that's maybe a little bit more safe and contained. There are a lot of kids who are sensory seeking in that way. And I often suggest having a bin of toys. So if your child likes to hear certain sounds, have a bin of musical instruments. Let them shake a maraca, let them crash cymbals together. If they need the feeling of throwing something, can they throw balls in a bucket? Can you get a basketball hoop? And have a designated area where this happens so that they can't just throw all over or throw at people, but they're on a specific mat or you're outside in the yard where it's safer. So again, we as parents can put parameters around how something is happening. Trying to meet your child's need doesn't mean that you're giving them permission to just do whatever they want. You can still place parameters around where it happens and how it happens and what they're using to make it happen. Because I think sometimes that's a concern for parents, right? Then they're just going to do it all the time. No, you can say, oh, you need to throw right now? Let's go to your throwing bin. Or let's go outside and, you can do it on the grass where it's safe, that type of thing.
Wow, we had so much here. So let's remind ourselves, what are the four reasons? So the first was no, which is the tangible, meaning that if my kid did not get the toy he wanted or the popsicle or the restaurant he wanted to go to, acknowledge that it is disappointing not to get the thing that you want, and then offer another option. I also tend to ask my kids to come up with some ideas, and I'm asking, so what a solution can you come up with? So the idea is to replace one desire with another. The second thing is the yes, which is I want my kid to shower or do homework or clean up their toys, and he's not willing to do so, or she doesn't like to do it. What do we do in those situations? Again, we first acknowledge that they're not willing to do whatever they are expected to do. And then the next step is to make the unwanted thing as a fun activity and give option. And how do we come up with new ideas? We use the how, the what, and the where. We gave the shower example. How do I do it differently? So, do I do it long or short shower? Also, what toy do I want to use in the shower? And you also use the where, if you have the option. So, where do you want to take the shower? So those are the things, the how, the what, the where. Those are the other things that you can give the option from. We also talked about the natural consequences versus the logic consequences. Meaning if my kid is not taking the shower, the natural consequences will be he's going to be smelly. And if he's not going to take the coat, then he'll be cold out there. The other thing is the logic consequences. And with the shower, it could be, well, if it takes you longer to take the shower, then we'll read only one book instead of 3 books. One thing that I want to add here is do not own your kid's discomfort. Even if it's a natural consequence or logic consequence, let them experience and deal with the consequence. The third thing is attention. We talked about grabbing attention between siblings or kids that want to grab their adults' attention. Here, Mariko talked about responding before it escalates. Just tell them, well, I'm going to talk to you as soon as I finish my sentence. Please wait. You can give them your hand as a reminder for you to talk to them. Anything that will give them the feedback that you are there and you are willing to address their need. The other thing is being consistent with a weekly routine and integrate some time with your kid. It shouldn't be so long. It could be only 10 minutes a day. And remember, as Mariko said, it's quality over quantity, meaning you let them lead what do they want to do and engage with them without your smartphone or anything that can disrupt you. And then the fourth reason is to feel good. We gave 2 examples of throwing stuff and jumping. And in this scenario, again, if it happens, then first of all, acknowledge and say, I see that you like jumping. It feels good to you. Define a designated area to jump or to throw things so they can have their need met again. In all those 4 things that we mentioned, the yes, the no, the attention, and the feel good, we can always use the have to and get to, which is saying there are things that we have to do, like we have to work to pay the bills. Then there are also things that the kids have to do. And then there are the things that we get to do, which are more for fun. And in order to implement that, we can use the first then. For example, you first brush your teeth in the morning, and then we can go to the playground. Or you come back from school, you first do your homework, then you get to have your play date. In any way, do not address the need before the behavior changes, because then you reinforce the unwanted behavior. And this is a really important point. So the next episode will have more talk about how to motivate our kids to do the so-called right things and how to use praises in a wisely way. If you got something from this episode, please share it with your friends and make sure to subscribe to the Playground Talks podcast. As always, last thing is a reminder to treat your kids and yourself with compassion and curiosity. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.